There I was, standing at the kitchen door, holding the pudding tray I had made with such care, when I heard the words that shattered my heart like glass. Selfish old woman, doesn't even seem like we came to spend Christmas with her. Only thinks about stuffing her face. The voice of my own daughter Lucy echoed through the living room like a slap to the soul. My fingers trembled so much, I almost let the tray slip from my wrinkled hands. There I was, Martha Santos, at 78 years old, discovering that to my family I was nothing more than a burden, a nuisance that insisted on living. The pudding swayed on the tray, and for an absurd moment, I thought it too knew it wasn't wanted. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor that rose from my chest to my throat. In the living room, I heard the low laughter of Letitia, my 22-year-old granddaughter, agreeing with her mother while checking her phone. She does eat too much, Grandma. Have you seen the amount of food here? For someone living on Social Security, Mark, my son-in-law, let out a dry laugh. She must be crazy. Spent a fortune on this useless dinner. Useless, the word ricocheted off the walls of my chest. 47 years I had dedicated to education, teaching children to read, to count, to dream. 30 years raising Lucy alone after her father abandoned us. 22 years being a present grandmother, caring for Letitia when Lucy needed to work. And now, that dinner I had prepared with my own aching hands, seasoned with all the love still remaining in my tired heart, was just a useless waste. I leaned against the kitchen wall, feeling the weight of the years not in my curved back, but in my soul. The steam from the still hot pots fogged my glasses, or perhaps it was the tears I refused to let fall. Not in my kitchen. Not in my sacred territory, where for decades I had created memories, celebrated small and great victories, comforted broken hearts with hot soup or chocolate cake. I looked back and saw my entire life stamped on those peeling walls. It was 1965 when I arrived at this house, a young 20-year-old teacher, newly graduated and full of dreams. I remember perfectly the day I held the key for the first time, trembling with excitement and fear. The house was small, simple, but it was mine. Our safe corner in the world, mine and Anthony's. Anthony, my first and only love. I met him at the school where I began teaching. He was the principal, a gentle man with kind eyes, who saw in me not just a teacher, but a woman capable of transforming the world one child at a time. We married in 1967, in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church. I wore my mother's dress, altered with such care it looked new. He was radiant, whispering promises of eternal love, while we danced in the living room of this same house, decorated with flowers from our small backyard. They were 3 years of pure happiness. 3 years when this kitchen bubbled with life, with Anthony helping me prepare dinners, laughing at my disastrous attempts to make bread, teaching me to season meat the way his mother did. We planned to have children, dreamed of a house full of laughter and chaos. I had already mentally decorated the little room that would be the baby's, with white furniture and yellow curtains, because we wanted the surprise of discovering the gender only at birth. But life, as I learned too early, has its own plans. In 1970, Anthony was diagnosed with cancer. In 6 months, my world collapsed. I held his hand in the hospital until his last breath, promising I would live for both of us, that I would be strong, that I would honor the memory of our love. I was only 25 and already a widow. I returned to this empty house, to this silent kitchen, and thought about giving up. For weeks, I could barely get out of bed. It was my students who saved me. 7- and 8-year-old children who came to school every day, expecting me to be there, with a smile and a story to tell. I realized that, even without the children I never had with Anthony, I had dozens of children who needed me. That's when I met Robert, 2 years later. He was a salesman, a charismatic man who appeared in my life like a whirlwind of promises and easy smiles. I was vulnerable, needy, and he knew exactly what to say. "You're too beautiful to be alone, Martha. You deserve to be loved, deserve to have a family." The words my wounded heart needed to hear. We married in 1973, and in 1974, Lucy was born. I remember holding her for the first time, that tiny, perfect being, and feeling that my life finally made sense again. Robert seemed happy too, at least in the beginning. He played with the baby, helped me with nighttime feedings, talked about the bright future we would have together. But Robert was like sand between fingers. The more I tried to hold him, the more he slipped away. The nighttime outings began, the threadbare excuses, the distant looks during dinner. When Lucy turned 2, he simply disappeared. He left a note in the kitchen. "I'm not cut out for this, Martha. You two deserve someone better." And there I was again, alone, but this time with a small daughter to raise, bills to pay, and a heart that refused to trust men again. I dove into work and motherhood with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Lucy would be everything I couldn't be: secure, loved, protected from all the pain I had faced. For 28 years, it was just Lucy and me against the world. I worked during the day at school, gave private lessons at night, sewed clothes for others on weekends, all so Lucy could have the best. New uniform every year, complete school supplies, even piano lessons I could barely afford. In this kitchen, I prepared her favorite dishes, cured her colds with homemade teas, listened to her teenage troubles while we made cookies together. Lucy grew up beautiful and intelligent, graduated in business administration, got a good job. When she met Mark at 26, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed like a good guy, hard-working, respectful. On their wedding day, celebrated in the backyard of this house, because it was what we could afford, I cried with joy. Finally, my daughter would have what I always wanted for her: a stable family, a present companion. Letitia was born a year later, in 2003. My granddaughter, my little gift from heaven. From the first day, she was the light of my eyes. When Lucy returned to work, I was the one who took care of the baby. They were wonderful years, the happiest of my life since Anthony's death. Letitia grew up practically in this house, in this kitchen. I taught her to make cookies, to peel potatoes, to season beans. She called me Grandma Martha, and said that when she grew up, she would live with me forever. But children grow up, and Letitia was no exception. At 12, she began spending less time here. At 15, she only came when she needed money for something her parents didn't want to buy. At 18, when she entered college, our conversations were reduced to quick WhatsApp messages and protocol visits on my birthday. Lucy also distanced herself. Gradually, our conversations became functional. She called when she needed me to take care of something, when she had financial problems, when she wanted to vent about Mark. I became the solution to her problems, no longer a person she genuinely wanted to have around. Retirement came in 2012, after 47 years dedicated to education. On the last day of class, my students threw me a surprise party. They were 8-year-old children who barely knew me for a year, but they cried when I said I wouldn't be coming back. They saw in me what my own family seemed to have forgotten: a person who was worthwhile. The first years of retirement were difficult. Loneliness hit hard. This house, which had already been the stage for so much love and life, echoed empty. I tried to get involved in church activities, in senior groups, but nothing filled the void of not being needed, of not being loved for who I was, only sought after for what I could offer. That's when I began dedicating myself even more to Christmas dinners. If this was the only occasion when my family gathered with me, I would make it worthwhile. I planned for months, saved on pharmacy and grocery expenses, to be able to buy the most expensive ingredients, spent days preparing each dish to perfection. It wasn't about food, it was about love. It was my way of saying, "You are important to me, you deserve my best." But apparently, they didn't see it that way. And if you're following this story and identifying with the pain of someone who just wants to be loved and valued, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving accounts like this. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are those that make us reflect on how we treat the people we love most. Returning to that cursed night in December, I forced myself to leave the kitchen and enter the living room. Lucy, Mark, and Letitia were on the couch, each in their own world. Lucy was leafing through a magazine, sighing dramatically at each page. Mark was watching the game on his phone, grumbling when his team missed a play. Letitia was posting photos on Instagram, capturing perfect angles of the set table, probably to show friends how she was a dedicated granddaughter. "Dinner is ready," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "About time," Mark muttered, without looking up from his phone. "Mom, you overdid it again," said Lucy, but her voice carried no affection, only irritation. "Look at the amount of food. How are we going to eat all this?" "I made it thinking of you," I replied quietly. "Remember how you used to love my French toast when you were little?" And Mark always said my stuffing was the best he'd ever eaten. That was before Mom. Now I have to watch my cholesterol, my diabetes. I can't eat these heavy things. Letitia finally looked up. Grandma, you know I'm vegan now, right? I don't eat anything that comes from animals. My heart sank. It was true. She had mentioned this on WhatsApp a few months ago, but I thought it was a passing phase. Even so, I had prepared a special salad for her, had even researched vegan recipes on the internet, but she hadn't even noticed. I made a special salad for you, I said, trying to sound excited. Oh, cool, she replied, without enthusiasm, already turning her attention back to her phone. We sat at the table, and the silence was awkward. They ate mechanically, chewing hurriedly, as if they were fulfilling an obligation. No one complimented the food. No one asked how I had spent the year, if I was healthy, if I needed anything. The conversation revolved around their problems: Lucy's stressful job, Mark's debts, Letitia's university dramas. Mom, this stuffing is too salty, Lucy complained, making a face. The turkey is dry, Mark added. Grandma, there's too much sugar in the French toast, said Letitia, pushing the plate away. Each criticism was like a stab. I had tasted all the dishes before serving. Everything was perfect. They were complaining just to complain, finding faults where none existed, as if it were impossible to admit I had done something good. After dinner, they didn't even wait for dessert. Mark and Letitia went out to see the fireworks at the plaza. We'll be right back, Grandma. Letitia lied, giving me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. I knew she was going to a party with friends and would only return at dawn. Lucy threw herself on the couch, with a glass of wine, turned on the television, and ignored my existence. I began collecting the dishes alone. My knees protested with each movement. My spine complained about the weight of the serving dishes, but I continued. I always continued. That's what I did. Cleaned up the mess, solved problems, took care of everything, so others didn't have to bother. While washing the dishes, I finally let the tears flow. There, with my hands in hot soapy water, I cried for the girl I had been, who dreamed of a united and loving family. I cried for Anthony, who truly loved me, and would never have allowed me to be treated this way. I cried for all the dinners I had prepared with so much love, only to be despised and disrespected. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in my mind, an idea that made me stop crying and straighten up, as if an inner force had awakened after years of dormancy. The next day, Lucy, Mark, and Letitia left early in the morning, barely saying goodbye. Thanks for dinner, Mom, said Lucy, without looking in my eyes. We'll see each other next year. As always, they took containers with the leftover food, but didn't take the memory of special moments, because there hadn't been any. I was alone in this house, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I had a plan that had been forming for months, actually, without me realizing it. Each humiliation, each disrespect, each moment when I was treated like an old, useless piece of furniture, had built an iron determination inside me. I went to my room and opened the nightstand drawer. There was the folder I had carefully organized in recent weeks: documents, bank statements, notary papers. For 53 years living in this house, I had religiously paid each installment, each fee, each tax. The house was mine, completely paid off, and the money I had saved during all those years of extreme economy, working extra, sewing until late hours, was also mine. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Martinez, the lawyer who had helped me with the house documentation when I paid off the mortgage. Doctor, this is Martha. I need to make some changes to my will. In the days that followed, I dove into intensive research. I discovered the Dawn Institute, an NGO that cared for elderly people abandoned by their families. I visited the place, and my heart filled with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. There were dozens of people like me, people who had given everything for their families, and now found themselves alone and forgotten. I met Mrs. Rose, 85 years old, who had raised 5 children alone working as a washerwoman, and now none of them visited her. I met Mr. Joseph, a widower, who built a company from scratch to leave to his children, who had him institutionalized as soon as they got their inheritance. I met Helen, a retired teacher like me, who sold candy on the street to supplement her income, because her children said her pension was more than enough. It was these people who truly welcomed me, who listened to my story without judgment, who shared their own pain and discoveries.